This is Nicholas Garton.
This is David Dahmer.
And this is Omar Waheed.
And it's 365 Amplified for Friday, February 28th. How are we all doing today?
Great. It's a very special episode.
Yeah, it's more amplified than ever.
It's good to be here, guys.
Dahmer's here.
Dave is here.
I missed you guys.
The first time ever?
No, I've been on this before, just not lately.
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
But we're glad to have you, Dave. And we're glad to be here on a beautiful spring day when it's raining out but warm.
Ramadan does start tomorrow, and I am going to be hungry all the time. It's going to be...
Okay, ignorant question. Our Lent starts also next week, so like Tuesday night is like big. Everybody eats Tuesday night before Lent starts. Is there a similar thing?
No.
Okay.
There'll probably be some type
Fat
of
Tuesday.
first day of Ramadan. Let's all go to the mosque and eat, and then they periodically have those. But the further it gets into it for the whole month, they're like, you've been doing this for a while. It's a little less special.
You're fine. Yeah, you can get through it. All right. So we're gonna get into a handful of things here today. There's no interview. It's gonna be us talking about some things from the week. The first of which we want to talk about is WIAA, Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, which we should say is a private, nonprofit organization and therefore not subject to any sort of government edict or mandate. However, they decided to capitulate to a federal mandate. Nick, you did some reporting on this. Tell us what happened.
Well, last week they decided to have their board of control voted to ban transgender girls from girls' sports and to say that people born as a boy can't compete in a girls' sport in amateur athletics in Wisconsin.
Is this a big problem? Is this not just a problem? I shouldn't assume that it would be a problem if it were happening, but is it even happening?
It's not really happening. It's just a figment of their Trump-inspired imagination. But I don't know what the scope is, because when I asked the WIAA to provide me any anecdote, any complaint, forward me anything that they've adjudicated with the complaint, they didn't answer that off of multiple times of me asking.
So this isn't in response to any particular issue or complaint or anything. But and in their statement, they specifically twice said this is in response to the Trump administration's guidance directive that basically President Trump just sort of by executive order said no more trans girls in sports.
And so they're like, yeah.
And the NCAA, like the college version, and then WIAA both just said, okay. And haven't been able to say why exactly.
So I think that I think those are two extremely different things, the NCAA and the WIAA.
Mm-hmm.
The WIAA covers like children's sports. These are middle schoolers.
Yeah.
These are high schoolers. These are kids. They're not 22-year-old adults with like fully grown bodies,
right?
Who you're like, wow, that guy who was a 500-pound weightlifter probably shouldn't be competing in like the girls' middleweight, whatever. Like, it's not the same thing when they're 10.
Right. You also asked them a hypothetical. Tell us about that.
Inspired by you, I asked them. This was all Rob's idea, just so you guys know.
Giving credit.
We were bantering, and I was like, if Trump was just like, hey, we don't want black and brown people competing either, would they ban that too? And I asked the WIA person I was talking to, and he didn't sidestep it at all. He didn't say, no, we would never do something like that. He said, no, we can't speculate what we would do at a future vote.
If Trump decided we were going to resegregate sports, which the sad thing is it sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't feel outside of what he would try to do at this moment.
Not at all.
Right? If you're talking about, sort of statistical advantages, I think that you could see where a guy like him would be like, we need white basketball again.
Right. I mean, doesn't LeBron James have the same advantage in a room of white players as like the boy on the on the girls lacrosse team. I mean, right? Like that's basically true.
That's what I was thinking. But I mean, gender and race are obviously very different things. But Trump, I don't think understands that fully, and you could conceive of something where he would try to do something like that, and WIAA kind of didn't rule it out. Well, at least we should say the staff person didn't rule it out, and because that would be a board of control decision, right? It's their vote that they voted. Now, just out of curiosity, when we're talking about this, before you posted that story, I looked up the board of control, and one thing you notice about the picture is it's blindingly white and incredibly male.
Small town white and male.
Right. And what I learned in this process is that there are 7 regional representatives who are elected by either they have to be like an athletic director or a superintendent of schools or something like that. And so and because Wisconsin is very rural, a lot of these districts, these are small school districts, people, nothing against small school districts, but they're all 7 are white men. There is a at-large representative to represent non-public schools. There's also an at-large representative to represent ethnic minorities. And his name is Carl Moran. He's a member of the Lac du Flambeau band of Lake Superior Chippewa. And there's a gender minority representative, which is the only woman. So that's the makeup of the folks who voted to go along with the federal directive.
How many people does this affect? Probably 5. It feels like selected bullying. It's just like
it kind of does, yeah.
Well, that's what that's what all 3 of my sources that I spoke to said. You know, I talked to 2, school districts, and then I talked with Ali Muldrow, who all of them said this is just, cruelty for the sake of it, and just targeting children to bully, because when you look across the board, that's really what they're doing with a lot of immigration stuff, with a lot of, they're criminalizing children, or now they're discriminating against children. So you do see a lot of that. Ali was spitting fire about this whole thing. Said
the member of the Madison School Board, for those who don't know. It's unfortunate. And I know, like, superintendents of schools, at least around here, we're basically preemptively asking WIAA, don't do that. Like, it's not a problem. You don't need to announce You don't need to announce anything like this. It's just not a thing that happens. And when it does, it's not a problem. Like, why are you bending the knee when you don't have to? The only thing I can think of, and maybe we could have given WIAA the opportunity to make this excuse, would be school districts do get federal funding, either directly through Medicaid for special needs students, or indirectly from state grants and things that come from the Department of Education. So a local school district who has a trans girl on a girls' basketball team or whatever might be subject to losing federal funding, and the WIAA might be, I'm being very, very generous here, the WIAA might be taking the position like, we're just going to be the bad guy. We're going to insulate school districts from having to make the decision between allowing a trans girl to play basketball versus losing federal funding.
Or it could be like Ali said, where they are just using Trump to enforce their own bigotry.
I'm leaning towards Nick.
And I'm going to give a big shout out to this concept here. If you are a person of color who's even willing to be the at-large representative for minorities, I already know you're not a person who is sticking up for actual Black and brown and people of color's rights. Like, you're willing to be tokenized to that degree. Mm-hmm. I already know that you're not the one who, like, cares about.
Do we know what the vote was on this?
I thought about asking them, but they ghosted me after when they realized where this was really going.
Yeah.
So do you think this is just wedge issues that that the national use, and they're localizing? They're using like gay people, trans people, Black people, brown people on these tiny wedge issues that don't necessarily affect a lot of people, but they want to, it's all part of the, whatever the national to keep doing this everywhere, and they're hurting actual people in it, but they don't seem to care about that as much as just keeping these wedge issues going.
And they can't even keep it with the grown folks. They got to hurt the kids.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the worst part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that story's up at Madison365.org. We'll link in the show notes. Thank you, Nick, for that reporting. We're going to stick with the school board, and I'm going to stick with Nick because another thing we talked about over the past several weeks is the Forward Career and College Academy proposed charter high school that was proposed by John McKenzie and Michael Johnson from the Boys and Girls Club. They had a whole board put together, and they were going to launch a charter school either through the Madison Metro School District, or if the Madison Metro School District Board of Education voted it down, to go through UW to get a charter to have 600 high school students in a high school that was focused on skilled trades. What happened with that, Nick, this week?
Well, that's what I was actually interviewing Ali Muldrow about as a school board member when lightning struck my brain and I realized who I was talking to and pivoted to the WIAA story. But they've decided to withdraw that. Mm-hmm. They're not going to seek a charter.
They just pulled the plug on the whole thing.
Yeah, they felt like it's not going to happen. They had a bad meeting during the school board meeting last week where it turned out they didn't have any support. Realized that now Michael Johnson, the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, is saying, no, this was just my idea to pull the plug. I felt like it wasn't the right time, and I felt like it needed another year.
Oh, okay.
I thought Michael Johnson had the support of all people of color for the school.
He had tremendous support.
He did have tremendous support from community people, and at the one meeting that they did have public comment, there was like 30 people in favor and like 3 opposed, right?
Yep, and he said that to me. He was like, "We had all the support from the community, but
but they didn't have the votes on the school board, that's where you need it. And if he went through UW, you'd probably have to build a building." Right. Which would have added significantly to the expense. So where it landed, I think, is, and this is what in the press release that they put out, which you talked to some folks, they didn't say much more than this, but that they're going to basically work with Madison Metro Schools to implement some of the ideas in the Forward College and Career Academy proposal, just to get more skilled trades focus, especially for students of color.
And they've been working with MMSD. Michael told me to make sure I point out to everyone that the Boys and Girls Club has donated more than $25 million over the years to MMSD.
They could have just kept doing that instead of trying to build a school. I mean, if you want to implement trades-based education to it, they're already very well partnered with WRTP, Big Step, with MMSD. So what? And
MMSD has already partnered with Madison College.
Yeah,
on some of these things.
What are they implementing? I don't.
Yeah.
Save face. We almost had it, but here's our ideas. You should do those.
But it is very Caucasian, like skilled trades here, especially in Madison. Like you don't see. We're trying to find the stories of we don't have the stories. That's the fact that it is.
Yeah, and that was the impetus behind the McKenzie Regional Workforce Center, which has been somewhat successful, I think, in introducing trades as an option, as a career option for youth of color. And you won't see the big change in the workforce for several years, or a lot of years probably, honestly. But that's the idea, and that's what's happening.
Because a lot of people get it from their dads or their family, or the plumbing or whatever it is. It's like farmers, it gets passed on down, and when it hasn't been passed down, then you don't even know that that's an opportunity.
Right, exactly, and that's what the Boys and Girls Club.
It's a legitimate need, but
but charter high school maybe wasn't the way to get there, and
exactly.
And I think that's the recognition is that it is a need, and the school district can help that, and the Boys and Girls Club and McKenzie Foundation can all be plugged into that without necessarily opening their own high school.
Which I thought they tried to do by opening the McKenzie Regional Workforce Center. I thought that was the point of that, right?
It is. It was.
Okay. I'm not crazy here.
No. And that's been, like I said, it's been successful in the year and a half, 2 years that it's been open. I'm sure it will continue to be. Another schoolish story we're going to pivot to. Omar, we're going to come to you. You were actually at McFarland High School? Was it McFarland High School yesterday?
McFarland High School. The annual Youth Unity Summit from We Stand United, a local nonprofit that works to educate and beat bigotry in general. They held their annual summit, the second ever, and they had a very interesting keynote speaker.
You were very excited to go to this. I remember.
Let's use the word excited a little differently after I say the next words.
Okay.
What words could these be?
So the keynote speaker was a former neo-Nazi, Tony McAleer, actually very prominent former neo-Nazi who has been a spokesperson when he was in the neo-Nazi movements and a prominent leader in the neo-Nazi movements in Canada. He was the keynote speaker. He is no longer a neo-Nazi.
That's the key point here.
That's the key point there. I wasn't excited to talk to a neo-Nazi. I was excited to talk to a former neo-Nazi. I've never talked to a neo-Nazi before. I mean, I've dealt with so many racist people. I've met so many interesting people.
You might have talked to them. You just didn't know.
Well, I would prefer to have not in those cases.
Yeah, I didn't know where this was going because you're wearing like a black hat today, and you look sort of like
I talked to a former neo-Nazi and actually a very likable guy. Very easy to talk to, but which is surprising.
Yeah.
It took me like 2 days to wrap my brain around. I was like, oh my God, I just talked to a neo-Nazi, and like not just like a run-of-the-mill neo-Nazi. It was like a upper echelon.
So once you're in that kind of work or whatever, it's hard to get out of that. Almost impossible. How did he get out of it? And
he had kids, and he realized that I don't want him to do this stuff. I've been horribly violent and pushing this horrible agenda, and I don't want to do that. I don't want my kids
one
to
thing.
follow.
It was just a gradual thing, kind of.
Yeah.
Like something happened to him and he got struck by lightning. And
basically, he had kids, and so he left the movement when they got a little bit older. Not like significantly older. He was still children when he decided to leave it. Went to counseling, started a nonprofit called the Cure for Hate, where he helps other people leave hate groups and kind of rehabilitate them, get them counseling and opportunities and so on and so forth. But I met a neo-Nazi. That's the strong point.
This is the things you get to do in this job. You meet all sorts of interesting people.
I've met famous musicians, artists, politicians. The son of the last socialist president of Uruguay, who was running for Senate in Arizona. I've never met a neo-Nazi before. I didn't know that was on my bucket list, but it's checked off.
It's checked off now.
So what did he say?
He was just talking about leaving the movement and then the concern kids are having, especially recently with the current political spectrum of issues. But yeah, that's kind of it. Look out for warning signs, how to get kids out of it. He said what really got him is his childhood was very rough. His father beat him a good deal and felt ostracized, but it was also in the rise of like internet chat rooms, the internet, easy access. So he found community, and that's, the research shows that's usually why a lot of people join these hate groups. Sure, they're probably a little racist to begin with, but they feel ostracized and they want to find a community, and he found that, and he went with it. He said the hate is probably the easiest part to swallow, but it's not the thing that technically drives these people to these organizations.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that popped out to me in your recap of the event was that was his quote along the lines of, "You're not going to convince somebody intellectually out of this."
I say the same thing. We're not beating racism in the marketplace of ideas.
Right.
That I've But he said, go through their heart. Mine is, punch them. But, we're in the same vein there.
Yeah, it's when you talk about hearts and minds, it's the hearts that is important in this particular pursuit. Thanks for that, Omar. I'm realizing as I'm looking at my bullet list of topics, we're an education podcast today, guys. We have WIAA, we have the charter school, we have your visit to McFarland School, and Dave has a couple of school-related stories as well. Southside Elementary here in Madison is getting a new name.
Yeah, Laurie Man Cary Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided that at the school board meeting, and it was pretty. People are very happy about that.
Yeah.
For at least people that I know.
Yeah.
She was a person that was kind of dedicated her life to education. She founded the Man Scholars Program, and her parents, Bernard and Kathy Mann, had 4 kids, and they dedicated their life to education, and they wanted to make sure that all the students, especially students of color in MUSD, had the same opportunity. So the Man Scholars Program has been around for 30 years. It has a 100% graduation rate, and it's just helps kids with scholarships, helps them with mentorship. Not like always the top brightest kids, but the kids that need some help in all of the 4 high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's been doing that, or she did that until she died in November of 2020. Very sad. But she is one of the founders, and she was just one of those amazing people that she was very, very humble. She did things quietly, yet so many people knew her. I mean, she was at the games and she was cheering for her kids, and she was out there, but she never sought recognition. A lot of people that get schools named after them, they're out there, and they're a little bit louder usually. And she very quietly did what she did, and amazingly, they picked her. Out of some other candidates, I think Ada Deer was one of the candidates, a major figure, and so that was people were really excited about that. So Southside Elementary is the newest school in Madison, Badger Rock, and so they're going to officially rename that at the beginning of next year.
It'll be Man Cary. It'll be Cary Elementary School. Probably it'll be Laurie Man Cary.
Laurie Man Cary Elementary School or Community Elementary School. I'm not sure if they decided.
It'll be interesting to see what it becomes colloquially. If it's
lot
Man
of
Cary or just Cary.
LMC maybe.
LMC.
Or,
there you go. LMC.
Yeah.
I think we should.
I think that works. Yeah.
We should just adopt that. LMC Elementary.
But I think it's kind of cool that they're renaming a lot of the schools, and Malele, and it's just we've had these
Bell Phillips Memorial,
exactly.
Maybe the trend will move to the south and we'll stop having Robert E. Lee high schools.
Ideally, yeah. But another thing that at a Madison Elementary School, Loletta G.
Yes.
is displaying some art. You had another story on that as well.
A lot of people know Lapham. Lapham Elementary is near East Side, very popular school, and that's the first place that the G's landed from Chicago. So Verilene G, the mom of Alex G, whom everybody knows from a mountain of things, including what's the Center for Black Excellence that's coming. And Loletta, that everybody else knows too, they landed on the east side of Madison. People think of them as Southsiders, which they are. But the first place they went was the east side. And they went to Lapham, and she was the only black girl in her class. She said 1970 she was 4 years old in kindergarten. And in the story, if you read the story at madison365.com, she was amazed that they had a black doll in the class in 1970.
Wow. Okay.
And she's just, because it's back in the 70s and the 80s, there weren't such a thing, everything was white.
Right.
The dolls were white.
Well, they didn't have black dolls. They were just horribly, horribly racist. And
they
were not representation. They were caricature.
But she shared some of her memories, and then she created 4 murals since last year, and they're going to install them at Lapham. And she was at Read Your Heart Out, reading books to the kids, and then she was also at the assembly for that, and she got to talk to the kids. She got interviewed by a 4th grader, and it was kind of emotional for her talking to me, because she just when you go to whatever your old schools, no matter how old you are, you go back to where you went to kindergarten. It's just like a rush of just nostalgia, and and for her it was 55 years.
Yeah. So
it was pretty amazing, interesting story.
That's so cool. She mentioned Loletta G was sort of made her name as or was most known for a long time as a nonprofit executive, right? Especially Loletta's Living Room and
Defending Black Girls.
Defending Black Girls, which were basically providing resources and support for survivors of domestic violence and child abuse.
Yeah.
And she sort of came out as an artist, like 2019?
Yeah,
like
it
that.
wasn't too long ago.
Yeah, and it does these wonderful sort of digital art, and then she did a bunch of murals over at the UW Madison South Partnership space.
Yard signs.
And tons of yard signs, yep, and Black Lives Matter yard signs and Kamala Harris yard signs, and it's just really, she's become rather prominent as an artist rather late in life, which is really, really cool.
I mean, for a lot of people, she's become more well-known for her artists that just started than, for a lot of her work. Yep.
And that, again, is up at madison365.org. And those murals, are they up now? Or are they?
No, I'm not. She wasn't quite sure when they were going to be installed.
Okay. But they're going to be at a level.
They will be up. Yeah, there's 4 of them.
Yep. Very cool. We'll pay attention to that as they go up. Before we close this week, I have 2 things that I want you to do, listeners. First of all, we have understanding that there's a lot of news happening. And things happening very quickly and all the time, and we can't always be on top of everything. We would love it if you would let us know if there are stories that need to be told. Particularly, we've in our sort of strategy meeting earlier this week, we sort of said out loud what we had already been doing, which is to say, really paying attention to the local impacts of the Trump administration, which is part of the WIAA story, which is, we're going to do more on immigration and undocumented people and how they're being affected, and how the healthcare system is being affected, how the arts funding is being affected here in Madison and in Wisconsin. So if you are a person who maybe is a federal employee who's been laid off, or who are seeing cuts and chicanery and shenanigans in your office, or if you're a federal contractor, or if you're a nonprofit that gets federal funding, and you think that needs to be told, or anything else unrelated to federal government, if it's just, somebody needs to be held accountable. We have a new page at madison365.org/tips. And there you can either email us if it's, something easy. There's a form you can plug in some info if you have it. And if it's something that is very sensitive and you want to be really sensitive about it, my Signal username is on there, which I'll just say out loud: Rob Chappell, CHAPPELL.65. Rob Chappell.65 is my Signal. That's an encrypted messaging app that you could use. And the general rule is we need to know who you are so that we can verify, because whatever you tell us, we'll believe you, but we can't publish what we believe. We got to publish what we can verify, right? So we need to know who you are, but we don't have to tell anybody else who you are, and we won't if you don't want us to. So again, that's madison365.org/tips. And finally, later in March, as we have every March since 2020, we're going to publish a list of Wisconsin's most influential Native American leaders. And we need to know who they are, because we know a handful, we know some, but there are a lot of people out there doing good work who we don't know. So email us, news@madison365.org. We also have a nomination form on our website, which the link is too long to say out loud, but I'll put it in the show notes. So watch for that. But not necessarily just elected tribal leaders. We're talking about business leaders. We're talking about nonprofit leaders, government leaders, elders who aren't necessarily elected to positions, but just folks who wield influence both within the indigenous communities as well as just across Wisconsin more broadly. Those are the people we want to highlight. If you go to madison365.org/most influential, you can see previous lists. We don't repeat people. So you can take a look at those and then shoot us an email, news@madison365.org with the names. Anything else, guys? I think we did a podcast.
Yeah.
Nice. I think we got it. All right, folks. Have a great weekend. We'll talk again soon. 365 Amplified is produced and edited by me, Rob Chappell, and is a production of 365 Media Foundation, a nonprofit, local, independent media organization in Madison, Wisconsin. Wherever you're listening to this right now, hit the subscribe or follow button. to get new episodes every Friday. And between episodes, get your latest news at madison365.org and follow us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Threads. Wherever you get your news, we'll be there.